Listen. So Netflix has a couple of movies out that we wanted to cover in one video. One is Shakespeare a la Chalamet. Another, a psychological thriller where a man loses his wife and daughter in the ER. And then a spooky movie dealing with a bubble boy who can't leave his house. Let me explain. So the first one I want to start with is The King, which I'd give a junior prize to, just off of the memes alone. Luckily, you can stream it since Plan B produced this with Netflix. It's written by Joel Edgerton and director David Michôd, who did Animal Kingdom, which I highly recommend if you haven't got that one. But he also did The Rover, making this his reunion with Pattinson. And he also did War Machine, another Plan B movie Netflix had no plan B for. Luckily, he's got the king of white boy Twitter himself to helm this film, and I'd say he makes a decent movie king. He's not up there with the greats, but I like this speech.
You expected me a speech? I've only one to give.
But in case you don't know anything about Henry V, he actually came before Henry VI, but after Henry IV. And even though he only ruled for a decade, this man has plays by Shakespeare on him, causing his legacy to endure for centuries. In the Netflix version, they dramatize his perils as a young boy during a time when they were losing hundreds of men at war, yet the king wouldn't pay for those who were caught. He wouldn't pay for their ransoms because then he wouldn't have enough for his chicken. Eventually, his dad dies, as well as his brother Tommen, so the pacifist Henry, who was vehemently against war and any kind of violence, becomes the king known for war and being really good at violence. But because he was used. Jon Snow knew nothing, but Henry over here has to get reminded by the screenwriter over and over that people are never prepared for war. But the thing he forgot to tell him was that some people also hope for it and profit from it. This dude right here ends up being the guy who screwed everything over for him just because he wanted him to be in power, but more so because he was gonna profit from it. This man is Dick Cheney and Littlefinger wrapped into one. Like, you should know, never trust Solomon Lane. If there's one person who fought harder than Timmy in these battles though, man, it was Robert with that accent.
I have not come to offer you surrender, if that is what you're hoping.
But you know what? I love his Pepe Le Pew accent in this movie. I've honestly loved everything that this man's been doing with his career. The fact that Robert Pattinson went from a vampire heartthrob to the A24 alum having sex with mermaids, and next he's playing Batman.
But yeah, the danger is always that it drifts off into kind of Monty Python.
Fantastic. Robert really suited up in this scene, even though he didn't stand a chance at all, especially after Henry's speech. Something that I'm not saying is the best of all time. You know I have a Timmy bias when it comes to it anyways, but I think it's good enough that I'm confident in him leading the new Dune with Denny.
Make it England! 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 Make it England!
Like, this boy's pacing around like Jordan in Game 7. He's leading the front of his pack like Cap and T'Challa in Wakanda, and I love the one take. Seeing him really get into the action made him feel like the king. Are there certain angles where it looks less like war and more like NYC Rush Hour? Yes, but Timmy killed it with his bare arms and even had soldiers holding on to their own spleens, bending the knee for him. Not as bendy as that sword Pattinson had, but hey, Jon Snow, look, you're not alone with the bendy club. By the end of it, Henry doesn't stick it into Louis, but he does his sister Catherine, who informs him that he got duped this whole time. And thus you get this bittersweet ending where he has all of this power. He's this great king only to end up heartbroken once again. That said, big shout out to the composer, Nicholas Britell, who previously did Moonlight, which I loved. He did Beale Street. He also did Succession, which I'm halfway through the first season, but the score is incredible, and Pusha even raps over it. Fantastic score for this one as well. I think he does a great job, especially with the coronation scene. And also a big shout out to the cinematographer, who did Macbeth, which, not my favorite movie, but I swear by that being one of the most beautiful looking movies of the decade. And he does a great job here with the battle scenes as well. Overall, I liked it enough to catch it twice for this video, and I'm left exhilarated to hear what king movie Netflix has in store for us next year. So this movie comes from director Brett Anderson, who's marking his third film in a creepy medical facility.
Disturbing psychological thrillers set at hospitals. It seems to be a little bit of a theme for me.
I thought this was a decent Netflix watch. I would give it a stream it, mainly because I've seen this story done a lot of times, but I don't think that should take away in case you've never seen a movie like this. But obviously, spoilers for this little bit that I'm covering it. If you pay close attention, you should be able to guess the entire movie right away, considering that the story is about a guy who hasn't been the same since an incident, and now he's taking his girl to the hospital after a fall, even though, like, the movie kind of spoiled to you with clips saying,
"They're both gone.
So it kind of leaves you sitting there, and considering we had just covered Puka, I'm just wondering, are they going to Puka us again? They Puka'd us again. I'm sure we all see different variations of this story where something traumatic happens, and instead of coping with it, the character creates an entire alternate reality, which, if you didn't push your wife, wouldn't have happened. I'll give the movie credit in the way it plays off the hospital scenes and having its casting kind of like offset the suspicions. I do think there's an interesting story there. I thought the clues made it a little too obvious.
Next year we fly.
And EMS just brought in a couple head traumas, so it's backed us up a bit.
I saw that. What happened?
A couple teenagers head-on collision. It was a drunk driver.
If I were to recommend some of my favorite I wouldn't really call it a genre, but stories like this, I would recommend these right here. But for this one, by the end of it, like I said, definitely a stream it, but one that uses Sam Worthington as an avatar for this gritty lesson.
But hospitals are just like, I don't know, they're just, they can be depicted as places where one goes to be saved, as much as places where you can go and to your doom.
Now, I like this one, but it could just be because I knew the ending before going into it, and I had no idea how they were going to get from point A to point B. It begins with this child named Eli who's being treated like a bubble boy, who can't leave his own house because he gets extremely sick. But while everyone's wondering what causes it towards the beginning of the movie, I'm just staring at this kid's feet like, well, obviously, it's because he's not wearing any socks. By the end of it, it turns out that he's the son of Satan, but you don't know that until the end of it. So them drilling his head makes no sense while you're watching this movie. Meanwhile, the poor kid doesn't know why he's in there either. So while this kid's getting spooked or dragged by these demons in this hospital, he has no idea what's happening. And I will say that that's the one part of the movie that kind of doesn't make sense once you know the ending, because considering these are demons, be it either his past siblings or his own minions, shouldn't they be like helping him instead of freaking him out? Like if I went to a family reunion but I didn't know I was in one, I would hope they tell me and don't, scare the crap out of me. That said, it is all supposed to be from the kid's perspective, besides like 3 scenes the director stated were from a different perspective, and there's a lot from the parents, but I counted more that broke the perspective. But I think the movie's tone and the setting do a great job at putting you in this poor kid's mind, sometimes literally. Eventually we realize that he doesn't have a gluten allergy, but that this entire place is set up to run exorcisms on him and other kids before this devil child literally raises hell and bright burns the world. See, the mom had a threesome back in her college days with the devil in order to have a kid, without her husband knowing at all. But it turns out that this wasn't a one-time thing for Lucifer. Pretty much Satan laid more pipe than Wilt Chamberlain in his early days, and now he's dealing with his own delivery man scenario as all his bastard children get sent to this exorcism hospital. So once Eli realizes he's a little hellboy and he's been done wrong, he decides to blow up his dad's face again, didn't know, turns his mom into the new Rosemary, and is joined by his new half-sister to go discover Stranger Things. And hopefully get some child support money from his dad. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Quick Timmy facts, I guess, if we're talking about the King while I was searching some stuff up. Heath Ledger had inspired him to become an actor, which I thought was interesting, but he ended up doing a lot more Batman. Supposedly, according to the story right here, he went to go do an audition and he was supposed to do the original Psycho, but he had practiced the American Psycho rendition, so I could just imagine how confused the casting directors were when this kid came in all crazy with an axe. Another thing from The King that I thought was funny was Lily Depp's comments on her forehead for this role.
So I have quite a large forehead, and when I went in for my hair and makeup fitting for the part, they were kind of starting to do my hair and stuff, and they were like, "Oh, your forehead is perfect for the time period." And I went and kind of did some research on it. And in this period, women used to pluck the hairs out of their forehead. Really? To have it was like a sign of beauty and intelligence to have big foreheads in the period. So they used to pluck their hairlines, and I was like, I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or not.
I don't really have stuff on some of the other movies. Maybe you guys do, to let me know some tidbits on the other 2 we covered. But we also do have an extra review, Rattlesnake. Alina had seen this one, and she told me it was more of a stream it. She kind of explained it to me as a rat. I was paying attention to it, but not fully, so that's why I want to cover it in the main section of this video. But that it's pretty much about a mother who will do anything for her child, and they kind of have an extra emphasis in the beginning of the movie movie where under any circumstances she would never hurt anyone, unless it's to save her kid. She said it was an interesting premise, except for the fact that she drags to react in multiple times, and that's on top of her morals going everywhere. Like, I've heard a lot of people complain about the cop-out as well, because supposedly she tries to commit suicide because, like, someone needs to give their life, so she tries to commit suicide in order to protect her child. And it's one of those things where you get it, like, it's a strong point. Almost every parent would do that. But the metaphor visually, the way that they showed it, it just doesn't work. It looks like a woman, I don't know, trying to do something opposite than what she should have been doing. She told me that by the end of it, she stalks a dude living in the middle of nowhere who we have to wait for sundown because movie rules, but he's abusive, so eventually she, it's okay to take his life for the daughters, and they live happily ever after, with the lesson being to, I guess, be a better parent and don't leave your child alone to get bit, or, be the best parents and make sure your kid watches anything other than Rattlesnake on Netflix. I'm curious to know your thoughts if you did catch that one. The performance seemed to be good, but I guess the story just wasn't there, which seems to be the bit with a lot of these Netflix things, is that they're releasing a lot of movies out there in between, like The Irishman and stuff, where, it's not like HBO where everything's quality. You have to watch like 5 movies before you get the one good one, unless it comes with a name like Martin Scorsese. But there's a bunch of these that I know that they're buying off of studios who couldn't release them in theaters, so they're giving it to them. And it's ironic that theaters don't want to support stuff from Netflix, considering stories like that. But I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And Robert will
Giant balls.